news for you. You can't wake up and be Mad Dog Russo. You can't wake up and be Adam Shine. You can't wake up and be Stephen A. It takes work. In the end, we all have people to answer to.
That silence was deafening. For a decade, Molly had been the steady hand guiding First Take through fiery debates, balancing Stephen A's intensity with calm authority. To see her vanish overnight, without a single farewell to the millions who tuned in daily, sent shockwaves across the industry. Fans flooded social media demanding answers, while insiders whispered that the truth was far messier than ESPN wanted to admit. Behind the scenes, negotiations had already reached a boiling point. Sources say Molly felt boxed in, undervalued, and sidelined compared to the network's biggest star. NBC swooped in with a lucrative offer, reportedly worth several times what she was making at ESPN, promising her not just a bigger paycheck, but more creative control and a primetime spotlight. For Molly, it was the chance to finally step out from Stephen A's shadow, but for Stephen A, it was something else entirely. A betrayal. A public reminder that even ESPN's most powerful voice couldn't stop one of his closest collaborators from walking away. That's when the cracks in their once unshakable partnership began to spill out into the open.
Molly is somebody that I have leaned on many occasions in the past, as she has done when it comes to me. We've been partners on the show for the last 10 years. And a lot of times, some of these things happen, and it's just uncomfortable to see.
And that, right there, is the heart of the story. Molly wasn't just negotiating for a paycheck, she was fighting for respect. For parity. For acknowledgement that she wasn't just the traffic cop on First Take, but a central force in why the show worked. Think about it. For 10 years, she managed egos, calmed explosive moments, and kept the debates moving without ever overshadowing the stars. She was the anchor in the storm. Yet when the money was on the table, ESPN treated her like she was replaceable. That's when the resentment turned into resolve. NBC saw the opening and pounced. They didn't just offer her millions, they offered her something ESPN never could, the promise of her own spotlight. A chance to be more than the moderator, to be the face of a show rather than the referee of someone else's. But here's the twist, insiders say Stephen A took this personally. Publicly, he played it cool, saying he respected Molly's decision. Privately, furious. Because if Molly's exit wasn't just about money, then it was about him. His shadow. His influence. His grip on ESPN's power structure, and that's why his words in the aftermath hit so differently. He wasn't just shaken by a colleague leaving. He was shaken because, for the first time in years, Stephen A. Smith lost.
He said, out. I was like, wow, so obviously this is pretty obvious. At least from Molly's point of view, I don't think it was the most amicable split.
On air at First Take, Stephen A. Smith played the part of the stunned colleague, visibly shaken but measured. But once he got behind the mic on the Stephen A. Smith show, the gloves came off. People forget they answer to somebody, he snapped, and while he never said Molly's name, the timing was impossible to ignore. It was the day after her abrupt exit.
You can't wake up and be Mad Dog Russo. You can't wake up and be Adam Shine. You can't wake up and be Stephen A. It takes work. In the end, we all have people to answer to.
Notice how Stephen A. never says Molly's name, always insisting, I'm not talking about her, yet the subtext is undeniable. Who else had just walked away from ESPN over contract demands, wanted a bigger platform, and dared to challenge the idea that he was untouchable? It was Molly, and his constant denials only made it clearer that this wasn't just business, it was personal. The timing lined up perfectly with reports that she already had interest from other networks, and insiders speculated she must have a deal lined up with a competitor, and they were right. NBC Sports, eager to rival ESPN's daily dominance, saw Molly as the perfect piece to anchor its morning programming, a proven ratings draw, a steady on-air presence, and a name with credibility. The very same week news of her NBC deal leaked, Stephen A.'s monologues shifted into lectures about humility, value, and knowing your place, which to audiences sounded like thinly veiled shade from a man blindsided by his own teammates' exit. And honestly, who could blame Molly? After a decade of managing egos, refereeing chaos, and being treated as an accessory to Stephen A.'s empire, she finally bet on herself, and NBC rewarded her not just with a massive paycheck, but with power, executive producer credits, cross-platform projects, and creative control ESPN never gave her. Meanwhile, her farewell post painted a polite picture of reflection and gratitude, but insiders point to frustration and resentment boiling underneath, part of a long pattern where ESPN undervalues its female stars. Jemele Hill, Carrie Champion, Michelle Beadle, all once central to the network, all pushed aside. Now Molly joins that list, while Stephen A. remains ESPN's $20 million man, proudly reminding everyone that every morning he wakes up asking one question, asterisk, who's really in charge, asterisk.
How do I get my bosses more money? How do I get something?
That's his philosophy, not how to elevate his co-hosts or protect his team, but how to make the network money and secure his own slice of it, and that's exactly why Molly's move stings the most, because by walking away and signing with NBC, she broke the system that kept him at the center, stopped playing by his rules, and forced ESPN to confront a power shift they never expected.
We don't get to define our own value. We don't get to define our own worth. We don't get to sit there and summarily say, this is who I am and this is what I'm going to.
Come on, who else could that possibly have been about? It wasn't some broad industry observation, it was a thinly veiled jab, and the irony is impossible to ignore. This is the same Stephen A. who spent years weaponizing his own value, pushing ESPN until they made him the highest paid personality at the network. When he fought for money, it was called business. When Molly demanded more, suddenly it was ego. That double standard is glaring, and the timing makes it even clearer. Just days earlier, Sports Business Journal leaked that Molly would step away at the end of the year.
This was an abrupt landing. This is an emergency exit. This is an emergency land.
Exactly. This wasn't just a resignation. It was a crash landing that exposed ESPN's fragile power structure. Stephen A. Smith's words weren't some casual commentary. They were laced with frustration, aimed at the one person bold enough to challenge the system that revolved around him. The irony is that he built his empire by strong-arming the network, yet when Molly used those same tactics, she was painted as difficult, as egotistical.
Am I going to share it with you? No. Because again, that's her story to tell. But I do think it's important that I started off the show by just acknowledging my love and appreciation for her and what she's meant to me and what she's meant to.
Look, nobody walks away from the biggest show on ESPN without a damn good reason, one analyst bluntly put it, fueling the growing theory that Molly's exit wasn't just about contracts or money, but about escaping Stephen A.'s shadow. The phrasing asterisk, that's her story to tell asterisk all but confirmed he knows the truth, yet refuses to say it because admitting it outright would expose not only ESPN's dysfunction but also his own outsized role in the drama. The whispers are getting louder. Maybe Molly didn't just want a bigger check, maybe she wanted freedom from the power imbalance, the constant reminder that on First Take, everything and everyone revolved around Stephen A. Smith.
When I look at the abrupt, like, I'm not coming into work tomorrow,
Yeah.
that also is like, maybe there's pointing the finger at Stephen A. Smith. I mean, you can play it out to the end of the year and move on to your next deal, but when you don't come in, it makes me think maybe Stephen A. is a part of her frustration.
For years, fans suspected that tension lingered beneath the polished chemistry on First Take, Molly stepping in to moderate while Stephen A. dominated debates, cutting him off when his rants dragged, and keeping the peace when egos clashed. But what if that tension finally reached a breaking point? What if NBC wasn't just dangling a bigger paycheck, but offering Molly a fresh start, freedom from Stephen A.'s looming shadow? That would explain the sudden exit, the skipped farewell, and her Instagram post that thanked fans and the First Take family but conspicuously left out Stephen A. by name. After 10 years together, that silence spoke volumes. Viewers picked up on it, commentators called it out, and Stephen A. himself clearly noticed. His reaction wasn't direct, but it was telling, sermons about leverage, knowing your worth, and remembering who's boss, framing her departure as a cautionary tale of overplaying one's hand. But in doing so, he exposed his own unease, because Stephen A. doesn't waste breath on people who don't threaten him. And that's why Molly's NBC leap cut so deep, because for the first time in years, ESPN's most dominant star looks like he's losing his grip on the story. And by all accounts, this is just the start. The NBC deal that lit the fuse on Stephen A.'s fury wasn't just about money, it was about power, the one thing ESPN was never willing to give Molly. The moment her exit leaked, insiders revealed NBC Sports was already well into negotiations, offering her not just a raise but real authority, creative control, and a platform equal to her talent. Meanwhile, ESPN had penciled her into smaller projects, digital extras, occasional sidelines, essentially pushing her into the background while Stephen A. remained the face of the franchise. That imbalance is exactly why the talks collapsed. Executives made a cold calculation: Molly wasn't irreplaceable. She wasn't Stephen A. But NBC disagreed, and they put their money, and their faith, where ESPN wouldn't. That wraps up this video. For more stories like this, check out the cards on your screen.